Hello and welcome to part 3 of The Little-Known Drivers of Easter, a series of reflections for Lent. I'm John Bridges, the author of The Blood of Innocents. I'm a Christian minister, and I've spent several years studying the history of the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth. When I started to understand what really happened during the first Easter, perhaps the scariest thing was realizing how easily we all could have made the same decisions as those who crucified Jesus. In the weeks ahead, I'm offering a series of short pieces of historical fiction drawn from the material in The Blood of Innocents. They're the sort of conversations and observations that were happening among the people who were in Jerusalem with Jesus, but who had no idea how his story would end. It will, I hope, help us rediscover why, with hindsight, 2,000 years later, we still do Easter at all. Last week we glimpsed how Pilate, the Roman governor, might have viewed Jesus. This week, we're going to hear a conversation between Caiaphas, the high priest of the temple in Jerusalem, and Jonathan, his captain of the temple guards. "You've noticed there are two types of lawyers, haven't you, Jonathan?" said Joseph Caiaphas, as they hurried through the gate on the west side of Jerusalem's Temple Mount and onto the bridge over the Tyropian Valley. "Real advocates speak with precision," continued the high priest. "Others clearly think their opinions command a premium for length." Joseph and his father Annas were already planning how to deal with Jesus. The family were among the Sadducee aristocrats who were wealthy enough to maintain themselves as high priests in Jerusalem. Annas, in fact, had been Joseph's predecessor. Their experience of the intrigues of power equipped them to deal with troublesome prophets, and without too much public fuss. Joseph was already late for a dinner with Annas to discuss precisely that. "I was wondering how much longer that Pharisee could go on," agreed Jonathan. For an hour, they had endured a fruitless meeting in the temple court, discussing Jesus' latest apparent wonder. Joseph glanced across at his subordinate. "Fortunately, priestly training includes maintaining gravitas in the face of idiocy," he said, raising an eyebrow knowingly, along with a believable smile, of course. They strode quickly along the road to the wealthy part of Jerusalem where the high priest's house was situated. "It's probably easy enough to do tricks in which dead bodies seem to come back to life," Joseph observed as they marched. "But 3 weeks before Passover, I cannot think of a less welcome arrival here in Jerusalem than Jesus the Nazarene troublemaker." "The 4 days between Lazarus' death and Jesus raising him from his tomb was a nice touch, though," Jonathan commented. "It's hard to explain it as a conjuring trick. Is sorcery more likely?" "That's hardly the issue," Joseph retorted angrily. "Everyone knows the dead do not rise again, so word of Jesus' latest wonder will be round the city by now and round the whole country by tomorrow night. That's the issue." "His arrival in Jerusalem was always going to be like a fox arriving in a henhouse," said Jonathan. "Well, that's an understatement," Joseph grimaced. "Jerusalem is becoming increasingly combustible. Half the mob thinks Jesus is the prophet Elijah back out of the scriptures." "I gather the Tetrarch of Galilee thinks Jesus might be John the Baptist back from the dead," said Jonathan quietly, with an unmistakable grin in his voice. "Good," said Joseph venomously. "Then Herod Antipas will be worried Jesus is coming to get him. Hopefully he'll hide in his palace during Passover. Not having to dine with a murderous little despot would be a blessing." Joseph shuddered at the memory of John's beheading by Antipas at a particularly debauched party. "Do you think the people will see Jesus as another Maccabee?" asked Jonathan. Joseph sniffed dismissively, but then considered the idea for a moment. "Well, when the Maccabees overthrew the Syrians, they cleaned up the corruption in the temple organization and set up a Hebrew state too. Some are indeed hoping Jesus will do the same." "Could he threaten us as well?" "Jesus," Joseph snorted, "the chosen one. Why would it please the Lord, the God of Abraham, to choose an illiterate builder, especially one from Galilee?" "Many of the prophets were humble men," pointed out Jonathan. "Prophets, yes. Occasionally." Joseph paused. Then he went on, "I could accept Jesus might be a prophet, even with his lifestyle." "I've often wondered how such a disagreeable individual can criticize us, or the Pharisees," agreed Jonathan. "He's upset our friend back there in court for sure." "Many more if he provokes the Romans," Joseph replied. "That old joke, has anything good ever come from Nazareth, could suddenly acquire a very sombre slant." The Romans are still chasing the large bunch of zealots who attacked them. Jesus must have noticed all the crucified rebels rotting on the roadsides. Over the years, Joseph had watched various messiahs lead bands of misguided fools against the Romans. Jesus seemed an unusually articulate and subversive teacher, though. His ability to construct spectacular signs and wonders was also disturbing, and there were other legends too. "Between you and me," Joseph said quietly to Jonathan, "I occasionally wonder what I should do if Messiah arrives while I'm high priest." "You don't really think Jesus could be Messiah after all, do you?" asked Jonathan. "Keep your voice down." Joseph glanced around at the torchbearers, who seemed to have heard nothing. "Of course I don't. It was what people were saying about Jesus that posed me the question. You know about the Persian Magi visiting him when he was born, don't you?" "The astrologers? Yes, I've heard stories." "Well, there's one story that his birth coincided with a conjunction of stars in Aries," nodded Joseph, "heralding an unusually important royal event. Aries being Judah's controlling house, those particular stars rising brought those men here to find our new king." "But we wouldn't get involved with astrology, would we?" asked Jonathan. "Of course not. But if it's true," Joseph explained, "then Beelzebub's arts might dance to the Lord Almighty's tunes after all. You weren't born then, but Antipas's father, King Herod, slaughtered hundreds of boys in Judea just to eliminate the usurper. Murderousness is obviously inherited." "Jesus seems anything but holy," said Jonathan. "Hence my questions," agreed Joseph. "We will just have to trust that when it pleases the Lord to send his anointed one, he will make it blindingly obvious." They were passing the palace which Pontius Pilate occupied when he came to Jerusalem. "I trust the prefect has yet to arrive?" asked Joseph, glancing up at the battlements. "Not yet, but due any day," replied Jonathan. "Good," said Joseph. "I would hate to give Pilate the satisfaction of seeing me hurrying anywhere." Thanks very much for listening. Next Sunday, in Part 4, we'll look at how Jesus' contemporaries would have interpreted some of the now famous events of the last week of Jesus' life. If you'd like to read more about why the events of Easter unfolded the way they did, then you can get a copy at bloodofinnocents.com or through my publisher at www.troubadour.co.uk, where you can also read some of the book in advance. You can read reviews of the book on www.bloodofinnocents.com or on Amazon. I hope you'll listen to next week's broadcast, which will be released on Sunday the 14th. In the meantime, every blessing and goodbye.